now I've got beef. I've got beef with these meds. Maybe not these meds, but the people using them sometimes. Here's what these meds do, but here is how we change our habits to make this sustainable, right? And I have never thought that these medications are the easy way out, but you hear a lot about people saying, oh my gosh, it's cheating. It's the easy way out. Like, absolutely not. This is not an easy way out.
Hello and welcome back to the How To Fitness podcast with me, Michael Ujoa.
And me, Kate Lyman.
And today we are back with a part 2 of a deep dive that me and Kate did way back when we first started this podcast. It's the first time we've done this, a part 2, and I'm excited, Kate. I don't know how you're feeling about it.
I am feeling all sorts of ways. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
It's so annoying that every time I do a deep dive, I say the same thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have too much going on in my head, but it's just like, it's just how it is. Like, I don't know what to do about it. But I'm excited. Can we go right to it?
Yeah, I'm up for it. I've got my jelly beans. I've got a drink. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to munch jelly beans whilst I learn. So go for it, Kate, please.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, today we are revisiting a topic that was one of our first podcasts. So episode 4, we recorded 2 years ago, just about. I think it was in March of 2023 we recorded it.
It's a long time ago.
The Ozempic Revolution, Exploring the Soaring Popularity of GLP Drugs. That was the title. And a lot has changed in 2 years. Like you said, this is the first time we've done a follow-up. And here's the thing, Michael, about the evidence-based approach we take. If we are wrong about something, we will go back and revise it. I don't know that we were actually wrong about things. I think I went wrong, or I tackled the topic differently than I would now. So hence a part 2. And here's where I feel different. And this is for anyone who goes back and maybe listens to that first episode, episode 4 on Ozempic. In that episode, I kind of looped these GLP-1 receptor agonists in with other weight loss meds, which is true because they're another weight loss medication. But in doing so, I feel like I gave like the wrong vibe because they differ in a lot of ways. And then in that episode, we also expressed a lot of concern for the off-label usage, which we now have FDA approval specifically for these GLP-1 medications for obesity and weight management. Whereas I think we had that back 2 years ago. We did, because Wegovy was approved in 2022, I believe, but like it was very new. And one thing that feels important is none of these medications are new as in like, oh my gosh, they've only been around for 3 years or whatever. They've been around for like 20 years, but the manner in which we're using them is new. And the things we're learning about them are new. And so I feel like we still don't know that much, you know?
Yeah, these are so like 2022, although it feels like a long time ago we did that last episode, like it's really not that long, like, but we now have a bit more experience of people using them. We have kind of people that are using them correctly, have a lot more experience in how to manage them with patients, and hopefully we have coaches that are open-minded to be like, okay, these aren't entirely a bad thing and there might be a right place and a right time for them.
Absolutely. Let's start with a little recap. We're talking about weight loss medications, specifically Semaglutide. That is how you pronounce it. It's from Novo Nordisk, the maker. It's Semaglutide, because I hear people say Semaglutide as well.
Do you know, there's some words that, even though I'm told I say them right, I still feel like I'm saying them wrong, so I'll always say them with like slight apprehension.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those words.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, it says Semaglutide is a GLP-1 receptor agonist, which was initially developed and approved by the FDA for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. Now it's under trade names Wegovy, Ozempic, Trulicity that we know them best, and the active substance is the same in all these medications. It's Semaglutide. Now, in our first episode, we focused in primarily on Semaglutide, but the conversation around Ozempic and all these medications now has broadened to encompass several other GLP-1 receptor agonists or dual agonists. Tirzepatide is kind of the most common that we'll talk about today as well. So tirzepatide is actually a dual agonist, slightly different mechanism of action, but for simplicity, I think I'm just going to say like GLP-1 receptor agonist and leave it at that, right?
Keep it simple, Kate.
Thank you.
We're both tired. We both have young children. Let's keep them simple. Simple is good.
Yeah, and it's like a tongue twister, and I will get myself all sorts of mixed up. So these medications, these GLP-1 agonists, function by mimicking the actions of the naturally occurring hormone GLP-1. This hormone plays a dual role in the body. First thing it does, it stimulates the production of insulin. Insulin is the hormone responsible for regulating our blood sugar levels. Insulin is an essential hormone that enables our bodies to use sugar from the carbohydrates in the foods we eat for energy or store it for future use. So it also keeps our blood sugar levels from getting too high or too low. In people with type 2 diabetes, semaglutide helps control their blood sugar levels and keeps them within a healthy range. Second thing it does, it promotes feelings of satiety or fullness, effectively acting as an appetite suppressant. It's this second function of semaglutide, the promotion of satiety, that has piqued interest in a lot of people. Satiety is the feeling of fullness we get after eating, and it's one of the main factors that stops us from eating more. So mimicking the action of GLP-1 and promoting feelings of satiety means that these medications can help people eat less, thereby lose weight, creating a calorie deficit. I'll put this in the show notes, but I have a really great, simple breakdown that gives a nice visual of what these medications are, what their roles are, the different types, the different names, etc. That's nice for those who are a visual learner, which is definitely what I am. So if you're hearing all this and you're like, what are you saying? Go to that link. So these combined effects we're talking about not only manage blood sugar levels in diabetics, but when they're used off label, they can promote weight loss in non-diabetic individuals as well. In our first episode, Michael, we came into this topic with a lot more skepticism, and we talked a lot about the history of weight loss medications, right? And I think that's one thing, like I said, that I would maybe do over a little bit, because the mechanism of action in these GLP-1 drugs is different than, say, fen-phen or ephedra or some of the other things we talked about. So while the history we shared about weight loss drugs, it wasn't wrong, maybe it inaccurately grouped these meds in with others that were far more dangerous or weren't comparable in some ways. Though I will say also, I was talking about them in the context of societal pressures around weight loss. So it's, I don't know, that rings true. See, this is the part where I could talk about this topic and contradict myself over and over because there's just so much nuance.
I think, I think we were maybe victims ourselves of the noise that was around weight loss medications, right? Where there was a lot of apprehension for many reasons, which I'm sure we'll go on to discuss. But I think everyone was a little bit scared they were just going to be misused, and that was the worry. So I think we probably went into the episode maybe a little bit more defensive than we should have done. Maybe that was the right way to approach it at the time, but maybe that's where our kind of misdirection of focus on went,
Yeah, I do agree with that. And so now 2 years later, I definitely feel like I have a lot more, not just knowledge on the topic, because I read about it a lot and I try to stay in tune with what emerging research is coming out about these different variations of these GLP-1 receptor agonists. But also I have a lot more experience working with individuals on these medications. And I want to hear about your experience too, but real quick, I spent half of last year working with this doctor, Dr. Salazar, a doctor out of Miami. She's an OBGYN, but also she has her board certified weight management certification. I probably butchered that, but you know what I'm talking about. She's obesity doctor.
Qualified.
Yes. And I had such a good time working with her because she's such a responsible provider, and she works with a population of women usually who are obese or morbidly obese is a lot of who she's working with. And her approach is not just to shill out the meds, but to really, really, really push for lifestyle modification alongside these medications. So we teamed up together to create a lot of education around lifestyle modifications and the medication. So here's what these meds do, but here is how we change our habits to make this sustainable, right? And I have never thought that these medications are the easy way out, but you hear a lot about people saying, oh my gosh, it's cheating, it's the easy way out. Absolutely not. This is not an easy way out. For those who are struggling with health complications from their weight or metabolic syndrome, whatever that looks like, this is not just a magic pill that cures everything. There are things that have to go alongside it, and it doesn't come without the side effects, right?
Yeah, I like that. And then also it's the way that the medication, we're hoping that it was going to be used rather than it just being this celebrity quick fix. There are some providers out there that are doing this in a sensible way, looking at the person as an individual, not just a statistic on a BMI scale being look, take this and you will drop weight. That's it. Go away. So it's nice to hear that there's people that are doing it very sensibly.
Right. And I think for every amazing Dr. Salazar, there's probably a vast handful of people maybe just giving prescriptions willy. We're going to talk about that as well. But it was an enlightening experience for me. Another thing I come into this conversation with knowing a bit more on is we're gaining a better understanding. There's significant GLP-1 and brain interactions, and that these medications have an impact on our brains just as much as our bodies. So we're not just talking about this is an appetite suppressant, because it's never been just an appetite suppressant. There are significant impacts on our brains and how we think about food or feel about food or impulse control and things like that. And we'll talk about that in a second too, but I'm sure you've heard that, Michael, maybe with individuals you've worked with who are on these medications, they talk about, the quieting of the food noise or things similar.
It is. It sounds like you've worked with quite a few more clients than I have that have been working or been using these medications. I've only worked with a couple who have been using weight loss meds, and that's the exact thing that they always mentioned. I've also got some friends who have used kind of GLP-1s, and the thing that they describe is quietening the food noise, exactly like that. It just seems to be like a better clarity of thought. Therefore, they can put the emphasis where it needs to be rather than just being unbearably hungry and suffering throughout the whole process. So yeah, the food noise one seems to be the one that gets spoken about the most.
So what I want to dig into more today as we approach this topic a second time is how options for these medications have expanded and how there is expanded use when it's indicated and also when it's maybe not, and how access has expanded. And we're going to talk a little bit about the role of compounding pharmacies and what the role they're playing in access. And I also want to talk about lifestyle changes and where we maybe are getting some things right with access to these medications and where we're probably getting things wrong. And as always, I want to highlight that our overarching goal in every podcast we create on How to Fitness is help you as listeners navigate this complex and slightly daunting topic with more clarity and more confidence. And we want you to be confident consumers of education, and digging in a little deeper helps us do that. And it's beneficial not just to us as practitioners in this area, but to those out there getting hit with the wave of information and misinformation at times. So
yeah, I just on that actually, before you jump into this, Kate, if you don't mind, I think this is where there's a lot of misconceptions, isn't there, around us working as coaches, right? Where we work with people with a kind of a myriad of health goals and fitness goals, is I think a lot of people expect us to be against these medications off the bat. Like I always get asked about them, and you can see the way the wording is about, like, what do you think about GLP-1s? And it's always expecting me to say something negative about them and automatically disliking them. And I think that the topic, as we mentioned at the start, is just far too nuanced just to be like, bad, don't touch them. So I think that this episode might take some people by surprise by the fact we're not just being like, no, awful, people shouldn't go near them. So I always look forward to kind of signposting people to our podcast episodes, fully expecting me to be like, yeah, it's awful, don't go near them. But we're not. We're absolutely not saying that. Yeah.
As I was writing this episode, I was thinking how few things I actually have a firm stance on, right? Like there's just so much nuance.
What do you have a firm stance on, Kate? We need to know.
Like a calorie deficit creates weight loss. I guess.
Yeah,
It's
there
like
we go.
that.
Yeah,
Energy
yeah.
balance,
Yeah.
law of thermodynamics. Like that's, but then,
it's true.
like I can't, there's so few things that I can say, this is the way, because that's not how the world works. And this is one of them. It's like, it depends on the person. It depends on their health, where they're at in their health journey. It depends on their goals. It depends on so many different things. So we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
I guess I have some firm stances on who shouldn't use these. So maybe that's where I can go and be like, this is what I think.
That's true. I think we pretty much agree on this topic, to be honest with you, with the way we've discussed it in the past. I would also say, like, because of the kind of content I create on social media, like you tend to talk about weight loss a little bit more in your content, whereas I tend to kind of talk a little bit more about like body neutrality and not talking about weight loss a lot. So I think that's what often surprises people, even though I'm not putting the emphasis, especially in the content that I create around weight loss. Like, I don't think there's anything bad with focusing on that, if the context is right and the person is maybe in the right headspace too.
Yeah, I struggle with that too, because I do create a little more fat loss centered content because I want it to be done right. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, my clients have these goals, so not talking about it at all doesn't serve them well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, we could talk about that later.
Yeah,
but
we'll put it on the list of podcast episodes.
No. Let me start by maybe blowing your mind, but also maybe not. Let me tell you the ad spend of some of these GLP-1 drugs from 2023. We don't have the 2024 numbers yet, but I expect them to be higher. So here's the ad spend ranking for some of the top or most common GLP-1 medications we hear about. Wegovy. $263 million. Wegovy was approved in 2021. Oh, I think I said 2022 a few minutes back. It was 2021. And it was kind of the first time we saw FDA approval for weight loss and obesity rather than being a type 2 diabetes medication used off-label. $263 million. Ozempic, which is the type 2 diabetes medication, $208 million. Ribelsis, which is also semaglutide, $199 million, which is like a lot of money for something I haven't heard much about. Mm-hmm. I don't hear much about Ribelsis.
Yeah. I've never actually heard that brand name before.
I feel like I've seen it like on a TV.
Okay.
commercial like while watching sports, maybe.
See, we don't
And
get
then-
those in the UK. We don't get those healthcare promotions
Oh
like
my
you get in the
gosh.
US. Yeah, yeah.
And we're inundated. Monjaro, 139 million. Monjaro was just approved in 2022, and it is tirzepatide instead of semaglutide. So if you consume media in any way, shape, or form, you probably know about these medications because they're not only being touted as this miracle drug by celebrities, but they're also hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on advertising. So in the show notes, I'll also share a link from the FDA that gives a comprehensive overview of these GLP-1 agonists. And there are several out there beyond just what we're touching on today. I think we've said this already. These drugs aren't bad. I've never said that. I never believed it. It's not the takeaway was from our episode 2 years ago either. It's estimated that over 42% of Americans have obesity and over 11% have type 2 diabetes. In the UK, I'm sure these numbers are a little lower, but it's not a challenge, right?
Yeah, I don't know the exact stats, but I think they are not much lower, but a little bit lower than the US. Yeah.
And these are 2022 statistics, but we can assume the numbers are similar or potentially a little higher. So when we talk about obesity and we talk about type 2 diabetes, we know that both of these conditions often involve metabolic dysfunction of some type. Not always. There are definitely metabolically healthy, obese individuals. And like that's actually what my research is on as a research assistant for my short stint in a PhD. But there are also a lot of metabolically unhealthy individuals with higher risk of cancer and liver disease, increased risk of stroke, heart disease, etc. And if these medications can aid in weight loss that in turn decreases the risk of these serious conditions without putting them at higher risk of cardiovascular events, that is a big freaking deal. That is a big deal. And we'll talk more about but what about prevention of obesity? Like all of that still exists, but this is still a big deal. We're not even talking about weight loss goals. We're talking about health and longevity here, for whom these medications can help them live a life where they are healthier and they are able to have a better quality of life. Now, these GLP-1 drugs have side effects, and I'm sure you've heard about some of them. The most common are upset stomach or stomach pain, nausea, vomiting, headache, dizziness, and fatigue. And then there are some less common but more serious side effects like gastroparesis, gastric bleeding, pancreatitis, and thyroid issues. And here's the thing. I guess I have a stance on this one, like a firm stance. For the right individuals, I think that these more common side effects, not the serious ones, are probably worth the metabolic and health benefits that the GLP-1 drugs can provide because we're talking about fewer adverse health events in the long run. And that's a good thing. So this does make the potential of these medications very revolutionary in many aspects. When we did this first episode 2 years ago, I had just started working with my first client who's on Wegovy. And I was figuring out what that looked like for them and in supporting them. And this is very uncharted territory for me, And now fast forward, I've worked with quite a few individuals on various GLP-1 medications, as have my team. And we've seen some really positive outcomes in their physical health as well as their mental health because we know that these medications decrease dopamine seeking behaviors. That's kind of what I was talking about, this GLP-1 brain interaction. That can look like these individuals on these meds saying that compulsive eating behaviors have been eliminated or the food noise they were constantly hearing is now quiet. To your point, Michael, you said something so great about that. That allows people to focus on the things that they actually want to focus on or need to focus on to improve their health.
It's really cool. I like that. I think you don't hear about the negative side effects that often, do you? It's really funny when you started listing off the side effects again, I was a bit like, oh crap, yeah, don't talk about that very often still. We see them within celebrity culture a lot. That tends to be the place that we hear about them the most, but you very rarely ever hear of the negative side effects of these things. I don't know, is that just me? Have I just not been looking in the right places?
When working closely with clients, I definitely hear about the negative side effects. I'm talking about this in a positive light right now, but I've also seen a lot of really negative things come from these medications. So it depends. Sure. Always, okay. It depends.
Yeah,
right?
I guess, you've worked with a few more clients using them, so I guess that does make sense.
But Mike, I want to tell you, I'm going to just swerve to a little side note because outside of prep for this episode, I have been so deep in the weeds reading about semaglutide for addressing addictive behaviors and its use in substance use disorder, especially alcohol use. So this is another topic, we're not going to get into this, but there is very new, yet very exciting, very promising research in which we are learning that these medications are beyond just appetite suppressant. They literally modulate dopamine and influence the brain's reward system. So the literature shows that this has led to, for people with substance use disorder, decreased alcohol intake, decreased drug intake, decreased marijuana usage, and outside of substance use disorder, decreased gambling and compulsive shopping.
That's really cool.
Isn't that wild? I guess that's one area where, we're still figuring out what this looks like, but I'm like, oh my gosh, if this works in that avenue, that is completely revolutionary because, and I'm going to get back to the real topic. Like there's other drugs out there that do that, but they make people feel really bad or they make people like apathetic to all of life or whatever. But like,
when did the research start coming out on this? Like I've not heard anything about that happening.
I have this one very long, but very wonderful article pulled up and I don't know, but I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, can we link it in the show notes? And can you send it to me as well, like after this episode? Because I want to read it. Thank you.
I just read through it. I've read through it twice now. It's very long, but it's just really promising. And it also talks about the limitations and how these are just kind of small scale observational studies or like the byproduct of bigger studies, but that it's definitely something that is piquing a lot of interest.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's cool. I'm happy to chat about that with anyone. Individuals who may benefit most from GLP-1 drugs aren't the only ones taking them. And here's where I'm like, okay, we also have issues here. Those with obesity and related health conditions aren't the loudest promoters of these medications. And we can see a lot of semaglutide use. Semaglutide, geez. See,
I'm so glad you made that mistake once. There we go. That's made me so happy, Kate. Yeah.
We can see a lot of semaglutide use through the lens of it being like this celebrity weight loss drug.
Yeah, which is what you hear about all the time.
That is what I find. I'm like, ugh, I like want to just destroy something when I hear that. Because of that, we are inundated with the Kourtney Kardashian's GLP-1 supplement. And berberine is nature's Ozempic over on TikTok and the Ozempic trend.
Stupidest thing in the world. Yeah.
And all of this noise that is distracting from the potential value of these medications for the right population. That I just... It's so frustrating to me.
It's so frustrating, but it's just inevitable, isn't it? Like with anything that happens that maybe has a slight benefit, people are going to latch onto it and market it to sell absolute nonsense. So it's just so obvious, but also incredibly frustrating, as you said, because it takes away from the potential greatness of doing something like this.
Yeah. And as another added side note, none of these supplements can even come close to matching the mechanisms of GLP-1 receptor agonists. The natural GLP-1 is broken down very, very, very quickly, and a supplement just can't compare to these prescription medications. And it also doesn't offer the same cardiovascular risk reduction. So like most things in the supplement industry, it's just people making stuff up for a profit.
Classic.
And I feel like all of this has flipped the script. So the focus feels like it's now on a fixation with being thin rather than potential value from these medications. What do you think, Michael? Is that what you see too? And I think that's where it's easy to say like, these meds suck. It's like, if you're seeing this through the lens of celebrity weight loss, Kim Kardashian's clearly on Ozempic face, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is just perpetuating thin culture.
It is. It perpetuates thin culture, which we've banged on about a lot, and the awfulness that comes with that. But it also, as we said, just takes away from something that could be a really useful tool. But then it also kind of leans into the bit that I have the biggest issue with these drugs, right? Where we talk a lot about the shortages around Ozempic and whatever it is use. And if we now have celebrities just kind of normalizing people doing it, people seem to start dismissing all of those potential awful things that mean that people who have diabetes can't reach their medication. Like it's just a really slippery slope once again, but inevitable as always.
And frustrating. Now, let me tell you about a day last week when I was working on this episode and I was like, I have an idea. I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type in semaglutide prescription telehealth. And what popped up right off the bat was a whole list of sites. I clicked on the first one. It was called Sesame, which I'm still like, weird name.
Sounds very holistic and very clean eating and almond mum, you know?
Yeah, something like that. So Sesame prompted me to add my details, which were some questions around like goals, lifestyles. And without making this story too long, I did it 3 times just to see. And here's what happened. So the first time I said like, my goal is weight loss and here's my age and weight and height and blah, blah, blah. I put in numbers that would make my BMI in the obese category. And it asked some questions and it said, weight loss would be really good for you. And then it took me to a checkout page where I had the option of 1, a compounded semaglutide, 4. Did I just say it wrong again? Semaglutide.
I think you said it right, but I'm not going to pull you up on it, Kate. Don't worry. You're okay. I've taken the mickey out of you once. I won't keep doing it. I'll just start to feel really mean.
A compounded semaglutide for $249 a month, or a prescription for Zepbound, which is tirzepatide, for $89 a month if your insurance could help. That was it. That was the checkout
that's
page.
surprisingly cheap as well, just to kind of make that
Yes.
point. Like,
Oh my gosh, we're going to get to that though, because we're going to talk about compounding.
Okay, I assumed that was going to be a lot more expensive than that.
Same though. So, and I didn't want to pay because I don't want these medications. I don't want to pay for it. So I didn't get past that. But I was wondering, like, is there a telehealth appointment or anything like that? Like, do you have contact with even a fake provider, or can you literally just boop, 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 here's my numbers. Oh, here's your, put your address in, give me your card, and it'll get shipped right to you.
I'm guessing there isn't anything else other than that. You probably just pay and get it. But I also don't want to kind of slate Sesame without knowing anything about them. So I apologize if we are slating the brand and there are better checks. But it wouldn't surprise me. There was a documentary in the UK recently. I'm going to butcher the kind of findings of it. But it was talking about how people will be able to go onto Facebook and buy GLP-1s off random people on Facebook Marketplace. And then obviously ending up with serious health complications. So the fact that you can do that, it wouldn't surprise me if companies were doing it in like a more professional looking setting,
Right. I mean, if you can go into oftentimes a nail salon or a med spa and get it like
what safety net is there? Yeah, right. Yeah.
So that was the first time, which is really easy. Just honestly baffling how easy it was. And side note, I just recently, my cat has asthma, which is hilarious.
It kind of, so for anyone who doesn't know this, please go onto Kate's Instagram. Is there like a static post with your cat? I hope there is. It's just got one of those.
If so, it's called William.
It is. He's a really cute cat, but he's got that face that always looks pissed off at the world.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're like coming at him with asthma medication.
He's a Persian, and so he's riddled with health complications. Anyway. Where I'm going with this is my cat has asthma. I couldn't get a prescription. I had to join a membership to get this vet access to do a telehealth appointment. We had to have this call, and there was so many things I had to do to get my cat a prescription. And I just can't believe how much easier it was to get a semaglutide prescription.
Yeah.
But I can.
Yeah, that's terrifying,
anyway.
Right? Yeah. It's
also, my cat's asthma medication was way more than a month of semaglutide.
Oh, was it? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. So I tried again. I did it again. I did kind of refresh. And I tried again with my real details. It didn't give me a goal weight number, but the checkout options were the same. I'm in the normal weight category or a BMI category. So I was like, oh, really? It just literally just same checkout page. And then I tried one more time, and I did it with my pre-pregnancy weight. And for some context, I weigh now 10 pounds less than I did pre-pregnancy. And it's because I have a lot of birth injuries and I can't lift or be active how I want to be. So it's sad. It's not good. My body fat is definitely a lot higher now, and my muscle mass is lower. But my pre-pregnancy weight, and this is why I chose it, was my fittest ever. My strongest, probably leanest I've ever been, best feeling. And here's what it said. Weight loss results aren't just something you see, they're something you feel. Your potential weight loss is 21 pounds to put you at 119 pounds. It's about 54 kilos. And that is literally the weight I was before puberty.
The way they've worded that is very pro-ana, the pro-anorexia website stuff you used to hear.
Yes.
That's straight out of that book, right? That's just so
And then
gross.
It took me to the checkout page. I have a screenshot of that. I'll put it in when we do our YouTube. I'll have the screenshot pop up.
I'm laughing, but this is awful. This genuinely
awful.
is awful. Yeah.
It's awful. Now, that was really easy. Like I said, I didn't do the actual checkout, so I didn't see what it was like after the fact. But, is that not enough, what we just did? And I'm not here to crap on Sesame. I'm sure everything that popped up would have been just about the same. I don't know. I didn't check them all. But the product that most of these telehealth companies are providing are from compounding pharmacies. And that's what I want to talk about here. So these medications can be really expensive, and insurance doesn't cover them often. So telehealth companies turn to a lot of compounding pharmacies to source their GLP-1 drugs. Compounding pharmacies are essentially pharmacies that create custom tailored medications. So they're very common, and they come in handy for people with allergies, or say someone who needs a liquid form of a medication because they can't swallow a pill. Compounding pharmacies they're not a bad thing. They're very accessible. Michael, do you know if you have them in the UK?
I honestly don't know, and I don't really know much about them at all, to be honest. It sounds a US healthcare based thing, so
it's probably
that
true.
Wouldn't surprise me if it's just you guys.
It's probably true. Yeah. So compounding pharmacies have state by state regulations, and their drugs aren't FDA approved or verified. So that's a thing.
That sounds very US as well.
From what I can tell,
Unregulated.
there are regulations somewhere. But reports seem to say that the monitoring of compound pharmacies and where they're sourcing their ingredients is pretty under enforced. It's like there's some kind of rules, but like we're not enforcing them much. Because semaglutide and tirzepatide have been on the FDA shortage list, something that you pointed out, that has allowed compounding pharmacies to produce and distribute these compounded versions of the drugs. So they are like legally allowed to do that right now while these medications are on the shortage list. Once they come off the shortage list, that may change. But because these compounding pharmacies can create these medications, the cost is lower and access is easier. But surprise, surprise, it doesn't come out without some risk. So I went straight to the FDA, pulled up the most recent report from December 2024. It was less than a month ago for us recording now, on adverse events reported from compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide. They most definitely do exist. And they mostly hone in on hospitalizations from improper dosing and overdosing, and compounding pharmacies using the semaglutide sodium, so the salt form, which is a different active ingredient entirely. From what I understand, with the shortage of these medications, again, what you pointed out, like some people with type 2 diabetes who need these medications for the treatment of their type 2 diabetes are not able to access it because of a shortage. From what I understand, it's the applicator that is the actual shortage. So I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the administration of these drugs is subcutaneous. And so it's just a small needle.
It's like click and go.
It's like a click and go. Yeah. Exactly. And I believe it's the applicator that is the actual shortage.
Okay. I didn't know that. I assumed it was the actual meds that was...
Not the active ingredients. And so compound pharmacies, from what I understand, they don't have the applicator, and you get like your biostatic water and your vial of active ingredient and need to like mix it together and inject it yourself. So there's a lot of room for error there, right?
It's like a do it yourself chemistry
DIY.
kit. Yeah, chemistry DIY, kit you get as a kid. Yeah, awful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like you're injecting something into yourself. So am I saying that all compounded GLP-1 drugs are bad? No, not at all. I'm sure there's some good compounding pharmacies, and I'm sure there's some less good compounding pharmacies as well. But what is true is they don't have the same quality control or safety or effectiveness or regulations or rules as FDA approved drugs. And there's a lot more room for error. Now, are we here using the FDA as the gold standard of everything? No, but we know that medications are tightly regulated, very tightly regulated, at least in the US. So we're living in a time when there's increased amounts of fear, and the population is very caught up in like specific ingredients and toxins. And what I am saying here is like maybe we take a little bit of that criticism into how we choose our medications. Just maybe. Right?
Yeah, like I feel like that should be like the bare minimum.
Bare minimum,
yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I will also link that adverse effects report from the FDA in the show notes. And I feel like this is a good point, a good moment to stop and say something I want to make clear that I'm sure is true for you too, Michael, is like we're not attaching morality or judgment to this conversation. I truly understand 1,000,000% why someone would feel uncomfortable or unhealthy or desperate and say, I can't wait for FDA approved meds to come back in stock, or I can't pay that price without my insurance's help, and would turn to a compounding pharmacy and said, I get it. Like, one of the questions asked on the Telehealth website was essentially, how tolerant are you to the side effects of nausea, vomiting, and general discomfort? And if you were low tolerance, they would start you at the initial dose, which is how everyone should start on these drugs. But if you were high tolerance, they would start you at a higher dose with a warning that it could be more uncomfortable, but weight loss will happen faster. That's horrific to me. Because I also, something I've seen in working with clients is like the titration of the dose feels really, really important in monitoring how fast we change dosage. But in times of an individual feeling desperate, I don't think that an FDA adverse events report from compounding pharmacies or a threat about extra strong side effects seems to matter. But maybe how we're talking about this in this format today in this conversation can bring some awareness to what are real concerns alongside these medications.
I feel like putting the onus and the full responsibility on the individual to make sure a medication they're taking is safe and at the right dose just feels incredibly wrong, because people are trusting, right? Like you'd like to think people reach out to these companies because they think, right, they must know how I should be doing this safely. With a few clicks of a button from you putting in your own information, be diagnosed and then distributed a medication that you need to monitor the safety of it yourself. That's wild. Like, that's completely insane.
I agree. It's pretty horrific, and it feels so predatory.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
I want to get into a little bit more of where I'm like, okay, now I've got beef. I've got beef with these meds. Maybe not these meds, but the people using them sometimes. Okay. Heavy use of these drugs for those who don't need it for health reasons is where I'm like, okay, we have issues when it comes to this conversation on GLP-1 medications. Now, Michael, you're probably familiar with the implicit association test. It's that one that Harvard's always doing, and you like correlate different photos with positive or negative words or categories.
I didn't know the name of it, but I knew the test, yes.
A Harvard study drawing on the data from this implicit association test found that implicit bias against fat people actually grew from 2007 to 2016, with 81% of people exhibiting this bias by the end of the study. In the same chunk of time, every other implicit bias, race, gender, sexual orientation, age, and disability waned during that time.
This doesn't surprise me at all, unfortunately. I think you can just see it on social media. I'd say even in the last couple years. You remember when COVID kicked off, and I feel like the rise of body positivity, health at every size. I feel like a lot of fitness brands as well were moving to be more inclusive. You had models of different genders, different races, different body sizes. That has completely been reversed, I'd say, in the last year or two. And the open disregard or hatred of people in larger bodies is becoming more and more apparent, or more accepting for so many sections of the fitness industry. So that's so depressing, but you can see it in real time if you spend any time on social media. I know so many amazing coaches who live in larger bodies, and any post of theirs on social media, you look at the comments and it's awful.
Horrific.
Yeah, it's really bad.
This is where I think we're in far more threatening territory with these medications. We know the value that these medications can provide for certain individuals, but we live in an obesogenic environment. Weight loss can directly and positively affect health, and for some, medication can help that individual fight the biology that's working against them, period. That's the whole conversation. And these meds can be a really big game changer in those circumstances if we're using them alongside lifestyle interventions. But what about the use of these medications in the pursuit of thinness? What about the use of these medications as a magic pill that's not accompanied by lifestyle and habit change because you want to get skinny? And what about the overuse of these medications as a band-aid to rising obesity rates without any additional policy changes that can actually address the root cause of rising rates of obesity and prevent it, not just treat it? I'm talking about, better food access, higher minimum wage that allows people to actually afford produce.
All that boring stuff, Kate.
All of that.
Don't talk about that. No one cares about those
and all
social
of that,
determinants of health. Christ.
I know, and my public health heart just breaks. But all of that can be an episode on its own. We can't forget those things. And in the past 2 years, I've worked with individuals taking Wegovy, taking Zepbound, whatever GLP-1, and experiencing significant changes in their health, both mental and physical, and they're feeling more capable of navigating relationship with food, or they're more able to be active. And our focus together, coach and client, is to solidify those habits so they can support their efforts, and so the changes they're making are maintainable. And I have known and worked with individuals who have received their compounded semaglutide from a nail salon or a med spa or whatever, who have lost so much weight that they can't be active because they have no energy, and who may no longer have the food noise we're talking about, but to me seem even more plagued by an obsession with the scale. And in this conversation about these medications, there's just a zillion N=1 experiences you can hear about: good, bad, everything in between. The data shows us that these medications are successful in weight loss and improving cardiovascular and metabolic health markers. And the data also shows that long-term success with these medications requires long-term usage. It's not take this for 2 months before your vacation. That's not what this is for. It
feels like this was always going to be inevitable with the 90s popularity of everything coming back. From fashion all the way to thinness, thin is in, unfortunately. And this always just feels like was the natural progression of these medications, especially when no one is really speaking about the negative side effects of it. We never hear of the celebrities on the runways. I know you quite like red carpet events, Kate. We spoke about this very briefly the other day.
I do.
Yeah, you
so guilty.
Kate loved it. There we go. I'm glad I got to call you out for that there. It's you've heard comments from certain celebrities being everyone's on them that's on the red carpet, but we never hear about the negative side effects from these people. We just see pictures of, oh, look how great they look. That's it. It's not good.
And you know what is wild but not wild, I think, is you hear that, oh my gosh, so-and-so looks so good, or they use Ozempic or whatever. And then you hear of people in larger bodies having lost weight and just being just shat on for it. Oh my gosh, you had the audacity to use these medications.
So true. Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't matter what you do, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And we're also going to make people who, I'm not talking about the celebrities, but just people in general, others who maybe could really benefit from these medications feel like crap because they used them. Let's just make everyone feel bad about everything. And like that just is it's so frustrating to watch. So I want to tell you about a little bit about the step one or one finding from the step one trial, which is essentially like the landmark clinical trial that led to the approval of some of these meds for obesity and weight management. Whereas, like we talked about, semaglutide was previously just for type 2 diabetics. This study is something we touched on in the first Ozempic episode. And in the step one extension trial, it was found that 1 year after withdrawal of once weekly semaglutide, 2.4 milligram, which I think is the starting dose, and lifestyle intervention, participants regained 2/3 of their prior weight loss. So a direct quote from the trial says, these findings also confirm the chronicity of obesity and suggest ongoing treatment is required to maintain improvements in weight and health. Straight from the mouth of the landmark study itself, it's saying this is a long-term usage medication. This isn't something we're supposed to just like take for a minute and then be done with, right?
Which once again, we never really hear about. We just hear about people take these drugs and they will lose weight, job done.
Exactly. And I still don't believe, and someone could very much challenge me on that because I'm like not an expert in this field, but I don't believe we know enough about the long-term implications and the benefits and the risks. And along with working with individuals on these medications, my team and I have worked with several individuals who have come off of these meds for a variety of reasons, whether it's, cost or accessibility or whatever. And we've come up against some big challenges, from navigating the client's very altered metabolism to the mental challenge of seeing such drastic changes in weight and body composition in a short amount of time. I don't know what we can do to put an end to the narrative of thinness being equated with health and success, which I believe is the reason for this misconception that GLP-1 drugs are some celebrity weight loss miracle. But what I do know is that first, I didn't get to touch on like half the stuff I wanted to touch on here because there's just so much to talk about. And like just about everything else, this topic deserves so much nuance. I think that there is good that can come from these medications for certain individuals, but that this one avenue for addressing obesity pales in comparison to the work that needs to be done to address prevention of obesity. And I also know that not everyone with a weight loss goal is an ideal candidate for these medications, and the use of a GLP-1 agonist purely for weight loss when otherwise metabolically healthy, to me, seems not at all worth potential risks associated. And it's playing a big role in perpetuating a thin ideal that has nothing to do with health. And I also know that the need for nutrition education and movement and even like mindset work isn't going anywhere, because a medication that works through the mechanisms that these GLP-1 receptor agonists do doesn't really have much to do with our habits or long-term behaviors. Maybe you agree with me here, Michael, but maybe some of the hate that is directed at these meds from people in the fitness industry is like, they're going to take our jobs. And I see that is such a flawed approach.
I completely agree. And a lot of the hatred, I think, from people within the fitness industry, mostly those who are quite vocal about hating it, usually are those who will just put their clients on extreme diets and extreme exercise regimes, and their only focus is dropping body weight and making people's bodies smaller. Therefore, why would someone come to you and beat the crap out of themselves to get smaller when they could do this in a way that is arguably healthier than being bullied by a personal trainer on a daily basis, right? Like there's a really cool discussion that we could have around that.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
It's like stressful to me. It's like, I want to talk about so much here. So I want to end with this quote I really loved from the New Yorker. Do you think you touched on most that we touched on? Like,
I think we did. What
am I forgetting?
No, I don't.
Feel so integral to this conversation.
No, I feel like we could probably have a 3-hour episode on this if we wanted to cover everything. I think the worry that comes from a lot of coaches is that people will just use these drugs, and I don't know, I feel like there is more of a need for us now, especially if people are using these drugs more widely, because as you said, there are so many more hurdles that come from taking these medications that people need to navigate. They need to do that in a sensible, healthy, sustainable, kind way. And that's where coaches that are respectful to the whole process and to the reasons why people go down this route and start using weight loss medications, I think we can be a real asset in helping people rather than just being another barrier of judgment that's destroying people's self-worth and self-esteem like it is at the moment, unfortunately, for like large areas of the fitness industry.
Agree. Okay, I'm going to end with this quote that I really liked from this article in the New Yorker. Again, I'll put it in the show notes. Here it goes. As I kept reminding Ozempic curious friends, these medications were designed for chronic conditions, obesity and diabetes. For people who are dealing with those conditions, Ozempic appears to create a path towards a healthy relationship to food. For those who aren't, it might function more like an injectable eating disorder. As the side effects make clear, it's not a casual thing to drastically alter your body's metabolic process. And there's no large-scale data about the safety of these drugs when taken by people who are mainly interested in treating another chronic condition, the desire to be thin.
I love it. Yeah.
Sums it up, right?
Boom. Yeah, that's perfect.
As always, to you listeners, we want to hear from you. The first Ozempic episode we put out, I had a lot of good conversations and a lot of people challenging me and things. And I'm open to all of that. We are open to all of that. And there are so many little like quick fire topics that I didn't get to touch on here. Oral versus subcutaneous administration, semaglutide versus tirzepatide, the brain resignaling we're talking about. I want to hear from you. Usually I make a blog post to follow up these episodes and I'll put in some things I didn't get to talk about in the episode. So I'll try to put those in there, but also we want to hear from you. We want to hear your comments and thoughts and questions.
I like it. Kate, crushed it. Yeah, we welcome the feedback, please. It's we know that this is a topic that is very polarized. I think wrongly and because of a lot of misinformation, but we do welcome any feedback. Like if we've missed the mark, if you think that we've done a good job, like please let us know. I also do want to point out that we're now recording these for YouTube too. So if you want to watch along whilst we do these, then you will be able to find us by searching for How to Fitness Pod on YouTube. And yeah, please share the podcast with anyone you know, like, review, whatever you do to make the podcast do well. I don't understand. I just like recording a podcast, Kate, but people listening probably know more than I do.
They do. They do. But thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.
See ya.